Okay, oh, that's wonderful. Okay, how many of you have been to Plates, our restaurant? Okay, super. So, well, just a little bit of background, because I think it's a little bit of relevance to this conversation. I actually spent most of my career in Republican politics. I ran a couple campaigns down in the Bay Area, and then when I ended up moving to St. John's, I was running the political efforts for the California Chamber of Commerce. And so joined the board of St. John's about 3 months before I actually joined as executive director. I had what I'll call a calling. I was at the shelter giving a potential board member a tour. This was December of 2006. We had just come off a very successful election cycle for the chamber. Was giving this board member a tour, and our board chair called and he said, we need to have an emergency board meeting. The food truck is not coming because we haven't paid our bills. We bounced 2 employees' payroll checks, and our executive director at the time is on vacation for 2 weeks. And I felt, and I can say this in this crowd, that it was no accident that I happened to be at the shelter when this call took place. And because I was at the shelter, they asked me to address the staff. And it was in those moments that I said, you know, what am I doing with my life? I loved my job at the chamber. We, like I said, just came off a very successful election cycle. But this work, what we're doing here, and by the way, again, this was December of 2006, so it was Christmas time. This work is where I need to be. And so I left my job and took over St. John's officially in January of 2007. And Bev and I were talking about this. St. John's is not a Republican organization, but the very clear, aha moment for me stepping in there was that as an emergency shelter, we were all about trying to find these women housing. But we weren't about trying to help them figure out how they were going to sustain it. How do you sustain housing without a job? How do you raise a family without a job? And so we began work on building a program that not only found them housing, but found them lives, found them the ability to raise their families independently, become self-sustaining. So I won't talk about that evolution because it's a long story, but where we sit today, which is 6 years later, when we started, we were a $1.1 million budget. We were 80% reliant on government funding. Today, we're a $3.5 million budget. We're less than 27% reliant on government funding. And it does deserve a round of applause. I will tell you, one of the fundamental beliefs we have as an organization is we can't be working with our clients to become self-sustaining if we're not willing to work on that ourselves. And so, hand in hand, we've been working with our clients to become increasingly self-sustaining, and we've done that through a variety of ways, and some of it I'll go into today. We have the emergency shelter right now, and that's where we started. We actually started on the steps of St. John's Lutheran Church 28 years ago, taking in homeless mothers and children. By the way, St. John's is the largest shelter in Sacramento County, but we're the only ones focused exclusively on homeless mothers and children. We serve 100 mothers and children a day under our roof. We're turning away over 200 a day. So a lot of us, when we think of the homeless, we think of the men or the women standing at the exits of freeways begging for money. That portion of the homeless population has gone down by about 35% in Sacramento County. The number of homeless families, however, has risen by about 15 to 20%. So the growing face of homelessness, unfortunately, is mothers and their children. So we have the emergency shelter. Now, that is converted from a 60-day program when we started 6 years ago to a 120-day program. And at the shelter, we actually, what we really believe is important is teaching the concept of hard work. You know, Maya Angelou has this quote, if you don't work, nothing in your life will. And we believe that at the core, not only working on yourself, but working on, working, actually working. And Bev and I talked a little bit earlier about this too. You know, so many of the women that we see now, they believe the American dream is a welfare check. And we are teaching them very differently. We are teaching them that the American dream still exists, but it comes through hard work. It comes through perseverance. So at the shelter, we're really opening their eyes to a very different life for themselves. So many of our women, again, they believe their past, being dependent, seeing how their parents were dependent or their grandparents were dependent. They believe that dictates their future. And what we're telling them is, no, it doesn't. You have so much ahead of you, but you have to work hard. So we're opening up their eyes to a very different future. We're giving them tools. We've got mental health counseling, drug and alcohol counseling, domestic violence classes, budget and finance, and most importantly, kind of the life skills and employment training skills that they need to begin to actually realize employment. Once they have proven themselves and we feel they're ready, we move them into employment training. So we've got Plates Cafe. It's been open 3 years, and 3 years on June 23rd. And I'm really proud to report in our second full operating year, we actually, well, we're a nonprofit, so I have to say it this way. Our revenues exceeded our expenses by $45,000. So we were able to fuel, and for the restaurant industry, that's like huge, right? About 50% of restaurants fail in their first 2 years. So not only did we didn't fail, but we became, revenue rich is what I'll call it. So not rich, but you know what I'm trying to say. So Plates is doing very, very well. We also, that was June of 2010, and April of 2011, we started First Steps Child Development Center, which is right next door to Plates. It's a child development center where we're also training mothers in employment training, but we are training them to become licensed daycare providers. So Plates and First Steps combined have placed 94% of their graduates in employment. 94% in this economy. And really, it's the hard lesson learned, and I, again, don't want to go into all those details with you, but most of the women, I would say half of the women come into us, they want to work, half don't, but half do, but they're not ready to work. And so it's really the life skills and the education and the stabilization that we give them at the shelter that prepares them for being able to start to work. And then at Plates and First Steps, it's a 6 to 12 month program. 6 to 12 months, they're volunteering, we call it volunteering, gaining skills, building work ethic, and then at that point, we feel confident we can look at an employer in the eye and say, this is going to be an employee who shows up, this is going to be an employee that you can count on being there, you can count on being reliable, here are their skills. And it's for that reason that of the 45 graduates that we have so far, only seven have lost their jobs, and 4 of those got new, what I'd call more suitable jobs. So really only 3 people in 3 years, and out of all those graduates have lost their jobs. So we're really, really happy with those statistics. As I mentioned, the shelter is only 120 days, employment training is 6 to 12 months. So we have a housing program as well, where once they time out of the shelter, we move them into independent housing, where they complete their employment training and transition to employment. I don't want to paint a completely rosy picture because it's not completely rosy. So of the all the mothers that come in, and probably in the shelter we'll see about 750 mothers and children in a year, about 25% actually complete that program. 25%. And I want to focus on that piece right now because it's part of what we're going to do in the future to really start to change policy. We've been in the trenches now for 6 years, and there is a lot of well-intentioned policy around these issues, but it doesn't often trickle down to the people that we're serving. And I'll just give you a couple of, for instances, in California, welfare, when President Clinton signed welfare reform back in '96, he gave states what he called flexibility to implement, right? There was broad policy, suggestions, but he gave states some flexibility. Well, no surprise that California was one of the 3 states who took a liberal interpretation to that, right? And we're one of 3 states that doesn't time limit payments to children. So what that means is, if you're supposed to be working, you're supposed to be gaining skills, or you're supposed to be gaining skills, you're supposed to be volunteering, all leading to working as a mother or as a father of your children if you're receiving welfare. But if you don't, no big deal. No big deal, there's no penalties, there's no sanctions, and in fact your children will receive payments until they're 18 years old. So there's very little incentive for our mothers to change their lifestyle. And it's not just, we really can't, we can't really blame them, because a lot of them are looking at what their parents did and what their grandparents did, and they're following suit. And it reminds me, I have relatives from the South. My grandmother lives in the South. And I happen to be a very big believer that skin color does not dictate anything but skin color. And my grandmother grew up in the South, and and she's a avid Christian, at church 3 times a week, but she sometimes uses the N-word. But you know what? I can't hold, I don't hold her responsible for that, because that's the way she grew up, and that's what her parents did, and that's what her grandparents did, and she knows I don't like it, and so she can watch me fidget when it happens. But that's so that's how I kind of look at our mothers. I mean, a lot of them don't have the education, they don't have the vision for what's possible. All they know is what their parents did, or what their grandparents did, or what their foster parents did, in many cases. So we're really, working towards helping these families become self-sustaining. It's hard work. It's even harder because policy flies in the face of what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, and that's why on Sunday, knock on wood, but on Sunday our board chair and myself wrote an op-ed that should run on Sunday. I've been told it is going to run on Sunday in the SACB, where we really talk about some of these policy disconnects. And as an organization, we're going to start to get involved in changing policy. So we are really excited to be where we are today. We're excited to be here with your support, and I really look forward to getting back to you in the future and telling you what we've been able to change policy-wise as well as lives. So thank you. Any questions, or yes?
Are there any employers that partner with you?
Oh, many, many employers that partner. The question was, do we have any employers that partner with us? Lots of restaurants, obviously, the Mulvaney's being one of the biggest ones. So if you're ever downtown and need a good place to go eat, I would highly recommend the Mulvaney's B&L. The Perry restaurants have been great partners. Sutter Health has been a great partner. We've got some catering companies. There's a medical billing. So we tell our women, by the way, I think this leads me to an important point. We tell our women, being at Plates, at first steps it's a little different, but being at Plates is not about getting a job in the restaurant or hospitality industry. We picked Plates because there are a lot of jobs right now in restaurant and hospitality, and those are great jobs for single mothers because they're very flexible. If my child gets sick, I can call you and say, hey, take my shift today, I'll take your shift on Sunday, no big deal. That works in these industries. But it's not about getting a job in these industries, it's about building work ethic and building skills, and we will place you where you with reason, right, where you want to be. So we've had women, one woman became a truck driver, one went into medical billing, some have gone into admin. It's really lots of different employment partners that we have, and we're always in need of more. So if there's any potential partners that you're aware of, I have newsletters on the table, get in touch with me. We'd love to work with you in that capacity. Yeah.
Michele, I think if I was correct, one of the employees said that your catering service has catered up to 5,000 people.
Yes, and thank you. You know what? I need to have you just tag along with me when I talk, because I always forget to talk about catering. So actually, catering is 65% of Plates business. We do some on-site catering. We've got a banquet room, and I was encouraging Bev to think about having your meetings there once in a while. We'd love to have you. Seats up to 80, but we do mostly off-site catering, and we've done lunches from 6 to 6,000 actually, 6,000 over 2 days for an educational conference. So our capacity is very large. We've done weddings, we've done anniversaries, 50th anniversaries. Our chef is actually the former chef of Mulvaney's and of the Esquire Grill. So he, leads the charge in terms of the quality of the food. We're very, farm to table, very into that. We've got a big garden, I think. Well, you guys saw the garden at the shelter. I don't know if you saw the garden at Plates, but we grow a lot of our herbs and vegetables and really believe in the sustainability and practice the sustainability of food and agriculture. Yes.
How old are the children? And then also, what is the address for Plates?
Thank you. Plates is at 14 Business Parkway. It's in the old Army Depot, for those of you who might have been affiliated at one time, and a little hard to find your first time, but once you go there, you will never forget. The age of the children. So we take children, we haven't had them born in the shelter, but literally their moms go to the hospital when they're in the shelter. We've had, newborns up to the age of 18. Boys, 15 and above, we actually try not to take boys at that age because some of the families are sharing rooms. Most of the families are sharing rooms. That leads me to another point, which is we received a grant to buy a shelter, which we're doing and should be moving into this fall, where every family we're increasing space from 11,000 square feet to 28,000 square feet, and every family will have its own room. So the limit on boys is likely going to change at that point, but we serve every child's age. Yeah. Yes.
Hi, from the opposite side of things, I have known women who have gone through your program, and she unfortunately was on disability,
Yeah.
but 3 years now she's been in the Quinn Cottages.
Oh, great.
And she absolutely loved it.
That's
She
wonderful.
came from a field.
Yeah,
And
I think I know who you're talking about, yeah.
maybe,
Yeah, absolutely. That's great.
yes, so
Yeah.
from the opposite side, the shelter has been wonderful. I know other women who has also gone through it, and it's been very helpful.
Yes, and I mentioned only about 25% of our women actually make it through that first phase. And I'm a really results-oriented person, so I tend to stay focused on that, but I am reminded, I get emails all the time from clients who didn't finish, right? So we don't maybe think of them as a success story, but the light bulb goes on a little bit later, and that's a wonderful thing. It's hard for us to measure that,
Yes.
but we know it happens. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah.
What's your sense of those who do succeed in the program, their shift in attitude towards, working for myself and achievement is a good thing? Do you have any sense of the percentage of people that actually shift their philosophy, having been locked into that mentality of generational welfare kind of thing?
It's a hard question for me to answer with any authority, but what I will say is one of our, and we talk about this all the time, we were talking about it yesterday, how do we hang on, because the shelter is very, very structured, very disciplined. I mean, you're up at 6 a.m., you have three, as a mother, you have 3 chores a day, you're in classes the rest of the day, you roll call, curfews at 5 o'clock. I mean, it is a very structured program, and you are forced to look at yourself in the mirror and face demons and do hard work. It's really, really hard to turn your life around. And so we are constantly asking ourselves, how do we keep them until the light bulb goes on? Because the light bulb will go on for most, but it's whether or not we can keep them for as long as it takes for that light bulb to go on. My guess, again, it'd be really hard for me to answer that. My guess is about, my chief operating officer would disagree with me. I think about 50% of the women actually kind of get it. Not all to the same degree, but 50% clearly don't. And I may be a little off, like I said, my COO would disagree. But, so of the people who make it, I would say maybe, 2/3 are of the ones who got it when they came in, and maybe 1/3, the light bulb goes on while they're with us. It's an amazing thing when you watch that happen, amazing. And the trickle effects, we actually, and I'll end on this note, we went to the county of Sacramento in 2010 when we filled out this continuum, right? We were a shelter until 2010, then we added employment, training, and housing. So we went to the county because we wanted to say to the world, okay, here's how much it costs us to move a family from crisis to self-sufficiency. County, how much does it cost you to keep a family in the system? And the county's answer was, good question. Good question. We don't measure that because it's hard. It's hard because these families access lots of pots of money, right? So that's the, we should be measuring it for exactly this reason. But we estimate, and we're having a professional researcher, it's going to take him 3 years, but he's working on a qualified opinion on this. We estimate it costs the county of Sacramento about $75,000 a year to have a family in the system. It's a very, very, very conservative estimate, but we estimate, that's the one we're using. It costs us about $35,000 to move them from dependency to independence. So over 5 years, that's about a $350,000 savings, and that is, again, a very conservative estimate, but that's the best we can do right now. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you, I volunteer at St. Vincent Hall.
Okay.
Wow, see a lot of families.
Yes.
Who, a lot of the kids to the adults
Right.
are not working. We have a very limited period of time with these people. But I would like to find out, can we refer some of these people to your organization? And what is the criteria to actually get into, because you said that there was a waiting list.
Yes, so let me give you my card, and let's talk offline on that. I'd love to talk to you about that, and thank you for doing what you do. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much, really appreciate it.